Hello and welcome. This is Corey Angela. Welcome to the End of Slavery Summit. I'm here with a very special guest, Dayna Martin. She is inspiring others for over a decade by sharing her experience through natural birth, attachment, and peaceful parenting and radical unschooling. She's an activist, educator, and sought-after public speaker. Dayna has proudly advocated for radical unschooling through the media for the last decade. This has allowed thousands of other parents to learn about unschooling and to proudly live their lives without fear. The movement of unschooling is growing tremendously thanks to her bravery and unrelenting drive to share unschooling with the world. Her choice to live out loud is one with powerful inspiration that is changing the world and offering more respect, peace, and freedom to families worldwide. She has been featured on many talk show hosts and many news programs, and she is also an author. So very amazing and very glad to have you here with us. And I've had other speakers and other people I've talked to who've mentioned your works, and I'm very glad that you're also providing with the audience some of your works as well, like your own book, Radical Unschooling, A Revolution Has Begun. You also have a whole website with a bunch more resources for anybody who's interested. That's daynamartin.com, DaynaMartin.com. So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be talking about ending childhood indoctrination. Thank you. Where do we start with this? I mean, why is it important to look at childhood and how we've become indoctrinated? How have we?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Corey. It's an honor to be here, to be part of this. So we can end childhood indoctrination from the point of birth, when it begins. And so my work is based on childhood, but it begins with birth and freedom with birth, and the medicalized management and control and the business of birth is kind of where everything starts. So for me, I learned about this. This wasn't something that I set out to do before I had kids, to live in freedom and to even be aware of the authoritarian paradigm in general. But through parenting my children, and I have 4 kids. My oldest is Devin, he's 23. I have a 20-year-old daughter, a 17-year-old daughter, and a 14-year-old son. So 2 boys and 2 girls who have been raised this way from day one. And yeah, I'm really happy to be speaking about it, but we end it from the beginning by not stepping into that dependence on authorities. But it takes a lot of undoing and deconditioning to be able to get there, where you can trust yourself and trust your children. So that's what I'm hoping I can support people with today and in the future.
Yeah, sort of like relying on the authorities, like you said, dependence is probably where the indoctrination comes in. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, this is this authority, this is my teacher, I have to take their word, or this is this textbook, and it's telling me the truth. Well, is it really? And a lot of parents today are really questioning things. I talk to parents a lot. They're going to school board meetings, they're mad at the schools, they want to change things, but maybe the solution is not changing the current systems. Do you think it's changing the current systems, or do you think it's getting out of those old systems and moving into something new?
Oh, definitely getting out. It's well-intentioned to want to change the system, but they never will. Any more than they'll change the medicalized version of birth when you go into a hospital. If you choose school for your child, you're choosing indoctrination. There's no doubt about it. Even with private schools, it's very much like that. But yeah, it's just stepping out of that whole dynamic, that whole paradigm, and going in a different direction, because all the focus and energy on changing something that's very set on being that way is really just a waste of time, and it's taking from your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from talking with a lot of other people, like I've told you, and like I mentioned before, it's becoming more obvious to me, like there are alternative routes that people can take, and they don't just have to go through this one system that seems to be failing so many people. It's not even helping a lot of people at the end of the day. So what is unschooling, this concept that you're introducing to our audience here? Could you sort of define this concept for us?
Sure. So unschooling is a philosophy based in trusting children with their education and their learning, but there's a lot more pieces to it. So unschooling is a method of homeschooling. Most people who choose to homeschool, they do what schools do oftentimes, and they'll just buy a curriculum and they'll do what schools do at home. And it might be a different location, it's in your home, but it's the ideas behind it, and forced learning that needs to take place is damaging. So I think most people, they might get a little afraid and they want to hold on to the edge of the pool. So they get a curriculum, and it's really scary to let go of that edge and swim right into the middle. But I'll tell you, it's much more natural. It's much more joyful. So unschooling is based in facilitating children's learning based on what they love doing in whatever way they like to learn it. So it's a perfectly individualized education, but it does take some undoing of thinking things in schooly terms. So deschooling is a process that needs to happen. But more and more unschoolers are, more and more people are coming to unschooling. So it used to be about 1% of homeschoolers were unschoolers, and now it's up to about 10% and growing. So it is very trust-based, like I said, but it's hard for people to let go when they first step into homeschooling.
Yeah. And so does this kind of tie into the reason why you call it radical unschooling, or is that like a more saying like I'm totally leaving the system, I'm totally done with what that authority is, what that indoctrination center is? What makes it radical?
Ooh. So radical unschooling is taking the same trust you have for your child's education and letting go of the paradigm of authority and stepping into a partnership-based paradigm. It's extending that trust to every area of your child's life, from giving them freedom with the foods they want to eat and bedtimes and hygiene and all the things that are really difficult for
Wow.
parents to let go of. So radical unschooling is shifting completely in a partnership-based paradigm. And it doesn't involve any punitive punishments. So my kids have been raised without ever being punished. They've never been grounded. They've never had things taken away from them as a means of punishment. They've lived like this from the beginning. So radical unschooling is extending the trust of education into every area of your child's life. So, I mean, to me, unschooling is a whole life philosophy. It's not just an educational one. So that's basically, the indoctrination is not just from our school experience, it's from our parenting experience,
Mm.
and letting go of the idea of behavior modification and living life as though school doesn't exist. Instead, we focus on living our lives together joyfully and learning through things that we're interested in. And yeah, so there's undoing, deschooling that has to take place with the educational side, but then also the healing that parents need to go through from their own upbringing is all part of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm assuming the revolution that you say is in that movement, like you said, that shift, that dynamic from here's a bunch of people who were once in that system, and now here's a bunch of parents who are out of that system. And you're seeing success already. You're seeing that people are living more joyfully. So, I mean, you see
Yeah.
it with your own eyes, you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the reason I even started was because it changed my life so much. I didn't know that parenting could be joyful, and I didn't know that kids could thrive like mine did by living this life. I trusted in it and I believed in it. And I had people that came before me that I learned from. Like John Taylor Gatto and I were really close, and he
Mm.
encouraged me to write my first book. And so he was like someone who really encouraged me and gave me a lot of information and support. And so I trusted the people that came before me, and I kept going, listening to my instinct. And yeah, I just learned a lot that I want to share with people, because I think parenting is supposed to be joyful.
Yeah. So
And yeah.
I have two questions about this that might come to mind for people who are watching. Like, what about social life? Like, what would you do then, like, when it comes to getting kids to know other kids that are out there?
Yeah, well, it depends on who they are and if they want to be around other kids.
Hmm.
You know, we think we know better, and we have to put kids in these situations in order for them to be learn to be social, but it's not true. All of my kids had different social needs. And so when they would voice to me that they wanted to be around other kids, I needed to facilitate that. So I did a lot of different things. I organized meetups, I hosted different co-ops, different fun things to do. And eventually I started hosting conferences where we'd invite hundreds, if not thousands of people to come hang out with us for a week. So
Wow.
it takes a lot of effort. It's not for the lazy parent, but not
Yeah.
all children have the same social needs, and you never need to force them in situations that they don't want to be in.
Well, wouldn't it be probably harder for the parent who's already in that system and they are not used to this unschooling? They have to like get there somehow. Is there a transition how they get from point A to point B?
Yeah, I mean, just like we've all gone on. If you're interested in learning about it, you'll learn it, and you'll want to do nothing but learn about it. That's how true learning works, and that's the basis of unschooling itself, is that Humans learn best when they're internally motivated. So I find that although there is a lot that people need to research and understand, it's a pleasurable journey to learning about it. It's not forced.
Mm.
And so forced learning is not learning. And that's what most of us kind of connect learning to be. So the journey is different for everyone, depending upon what kind of support they need.
Okay. Now, I think another question that would come to mind for people would be like technology and social media. Does that influence kids today? I mean, because a lot of kids would like really want to be on technology and playing video games all day. So we want to respect what they want to do, but at the same time, we may know better and say, well, they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it influences them as much as it does us. And so we've educated ourselves, we're learning about it, and we need to communicate these things with our kids, and we always have. I've always done so. So when kids are living in a partnership-based paradigm with you, and you're not limiting and controlling things, they have a really natural relationship with you where they believe what you're saying. It's amazing. They don't think that you're trying to control them or take away something. So you become a really positive influence in their lives, and they believe me when I talk to them about things. And we watch all different, alternative media together. We discuss the dangers, and they're with me. They're half of them are adults now, so they're not here all the time. Obviously, one's living on his own, but my kids are with me when they're on social media, especially when they're younger. We talk about it. We talk about crazy things. We support them through education, so they need to be informed. If you tell a child you're not allowed to use that, it's bad, and you're not by their side to navigate it, it's really dangerous. It really is. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of presence.
So like from what you've said so far, I sort of like as a health coach, I sort of get that feeling like you're there as a coach and as a guide to really help that individual. Just really they have the answers within themselves or they know what to do and you're just sort of bringing that out of them. It's like, oh, I know maybe I shouldn't be playing video games, but and then you are there to say, well, maybe it is a good idea to not play video games and here's the solution, right? Like you're not saying you have to get off of video games, but you're just introducing new things, like introducing new foods to get rid of like bad foods, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a life more exciting than the only option being gaming. I think that's important. And sometimes in the winter in New Hampshire, before we moved to Miami, there was times where it was like, okay, there's not much to do. I need to go. I need to step up my game so I can offer a lot of other things because there's nothing wrong with gaming and there's nothing wrong with technology whatsoever. But we need to offer our kids a lot of different resources based on what they love. So when Devin, my oldest, when he was about 14, the game Minecraft came out. It was when it first came out. Some unschoolers were playing the beta version of the game. And so they had these whole group of, I think, 14 teens that were beta testers for Minecraft. And about half of them were unschoolers. They found the bugs in the game. We had no clue what it was going to become. Now, prior to Minecraft playing this, my son Devin was into like everything completely like nature based. He was building survival shelters and he was studying to be a blacksmith and he was making knives and swords. And of course, that makes you feel like a proud parent when your kid's into all those kind of things. You're like, yeah, I'm doing it right. They're going to make it. But then gaming starts for some kids and you might have some fear surrounding it. But I never did. I trusted him and facilitated it as much as I did with everything else. And I didn't value blacksmithing more than what he was doing with Minecraft. Now that sounds crazy, but it's true. Yeah. And so when he was playing, he would show me, all the things he was building. It was a really incredible experience in his life. And I would bring him food up and I would facilitate his interest with a lot of other options. So I subscribed to gaming magazines for him. I found out that the first ever Minecon was coming to Las Vegas. And so we bought tickets. I wanted him to meet Notch, the creator of the game, and ask him questions. We facilitated so many things. We made Minecraft cakes and we started meetups for people and you name it. Although unschoolers don't break life down into subjects like schools do, and that's an important thing to talk about, the brainwashing with a compartmentalized aspect. The way that I facilitated his interest did touch on everything. I got him Minecraft books when they started coming out. And it was just an amazing nucleus for a while of so much more learning that, spun off of that. So that's just a little story about gaming in our lives.
No, I think that's beautiful because it's like we can talk all day about the school system and how it's failing people, but you're showing right now the beauties of how unschooling works. I mean, that I think is enough evidence to show it's like people can make their own minds. Do they want to be in this system of conform, stay in line, or this system where you have a lot more freedom, where you're supporting the individual? I remember, when I was in school, I had to read all these books I didn't want to read, all these subjects I didn't want to learn. And you're right. When I played video games too, I learned things I actually was learning, and that's a game, but the game was actually like very mental. And I think it also depends on the different types of games. And like you said, really just the support structure. Because we're intelligent beings, are we not? We are supposed to use that intelligence that we have, or give way to that.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's no doubt that anything in moderation is okay. And sometimes even if I'm doing too many interviews or I have a lot of classes, my legs hurt. Technology can hurt me too, even though I'm doing something good, like, so I get up and stretch, or I'll need to go do something else. But just talking to our kids about it, see, the problems come to be in the unhealthy use of it when parents limit or control it, because limiting anything causes an unnatural relationship with whatever's being limited or controlled. So all humans' innate desire for freedom will override everything. And so when you're telling a child this is bad and you can only have an hour of it, it causes an unnatural relationship with it. They want to do nothing but have their freedom, which is the first desire. And a warped relationship starts with anything being limited or controlled. And we want to get nothing but that, nothing but that. I'm sure you could look back, Corey, too, on times in your life where you were limited or controlled and you overused or overdid or got out of balance with your own personal desires. So moderation happens, but only with freedom. And it's not through letting go just physically with limits. Because if a parent is like, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to let go of limits, if they still emotionally have fears about it, kids know it. And that's not true freedom. So this is part of the work we need to do. We need to be with them. I mean, my kids were so into Minecraft for a time in their lives when they were younger that I was like, I want to be with them. I'm going to learn how to play. And I did. They taught me how to play. I even started a Minecraft YouTube channel where I would talk about unschooling. And it was kind of dorky, according to my kids, but we'd play together and build together. And we were immersed in something that they did learn a lot from. None of them play anymore. But that was a time in my life that was really special for me and my kids. But it's only through freedom that someone can find moderation and giving information. My son Orion, he was probably the biggest gamer out of all four of my kids. And I would remind him, why don't you get up and stretch your legs, honey? How do they feel? Move your ankles around, get up and move around. Why don't we go outside barefoot and do some grounding? And he came to me once, this is interesting. And he's like, Mom, I just learned on a YouTube video that there's something called blue light. There's light that can really hurt my eyes through technology. And he said, I want to order these glasses. I think he was maybe 11 or 12. And I didn't even know about that. Now we know about these kind of glasses now, but I'm like, wow. He's like, I don't want my eyes to get hurt. So with freedom and information and support, no humans want to hurt themselves. It's only when we say what you're interested in is bad for you and you can't use it. Only an hour, that's it. My son did a workshop with me, my son Devin, and he was explaining to all these parents, an hour is not long enough in these kind of games. You're just getting started building something. Of course, kids are freaking out. When you give them an hour, you need to just trust them and, have other things to do. So this is a big topic to me that, oh my gosh, I talk more about technology than anything I think in my work right now.
Yeah, but I like how you're not just making it out to be like the devil, because it really is just a tool. Like anything,
Yes.
it depends on how humans use it. I definitely used it for beneficial reasons, to meet people and all sorts of things I never expected before. I never even expected to get to where I am now to do this interview with you. Nonetheless, meet all the other people that's on this great event, this summit. I mean, it's incredible. What I started with was just researching ingredients, and my parents didn't tell me to do that. Nobody really told me to do that. I just got curious, and at my fingertips, with the freedom that was provided to me, I got the information that I wanted to seek out, and that information led me down more information and more information, more information. And then soon, because my parents were just so connected, we're very connected as a family, which is very rare to a lot of other families I see out there. I still live with my parents, by the way. I have no shame in saying that. It depends on the world condition and everything. But like we're very close, and so that support system, even if like they did not know like a lot of things that I know now, right? And sort of just by being with each other and them supporting me, our ideas just bounced off of each other, you know, and I would share with them what I learned, and I would always talk to them. Even after I went to the public schools, I would talk to my parents, and that would help a lot. And then I became cyber schooled, where I got to see a whole different perspective. I don't think that's going to be in the right direction moving forward, because cyber school is going to become more like public school, in my view. But when I was in it, it was very new. It was beginning. You know, you only had like 1 day of school a week or 3 days a week. You can decide your schedule, decide all your classes. But what you're talking about with unschooling is, in my view, the way it really should be. You know, where the parents are the teachers. I mean, because it's your kid. It's literally your kid. Like, wouldn't you want to be with your kid as much as possible? A lot of parents will say like they don't have time. They're always working. What do you say to those parents?
Yeah, I mean, and I think most parents would want to be with their kids if they could step out of an authoritarian paradigm, because the way that most parents are told to parent is based on behavior modification. And it very rarely focuses on the child's needs. And you're kind of in a situation where you're constantly trying to control and getting everybody to bed on time and making sure dinner's on the table at 7. You're so controlled by external forces, and you don't even realize it, that parenting is pretty miserable in the authoritarian paradigm. It is. And so the idea that a parent has to not only continue that, but then do everything with schooling, you know, education as well. Most parents are like, no way, I could never do that. And how do you do it? They always ask me, like, you're so brave. And I'm like, no, you're brave, actually, to even be, I don't know if the word's brave, but it's definitely not, because when you step out of the authoritarian paradigm and everybody is pursuing their passions all day, doing what they love, you know, it's a really joyful life. It's not like it is for most people. So what you're sharing about with your parents and the way that you guys have discussions, that's exactly how unschoolers learn. So you sit down and you're talking about different topics. Something comes up, and you know, our culture, we discuss it. We have so many different discussions. We could go on and on for hours. I mean, we just sit in the living room without the TV on, like some nights from 8 at night, hanging out until midnight, and we're still talking. Sometimes we'll watch a show, but that's not like the focus of
Yeah.
our lives, to decompress from all the crap we don't want to be living,
Yeah.
you
See,
know?
my parents, they look at their childhoods too, and they saw they didn't have much technology, so they would play board games and card games and talk with each other late nights like that. So they just sort of brought that with them. And I feel like bringing things along the generations would also be quite important, in my view. And it's unfortunate to see that, you know, the elder generation, they're getting, you know, oh, I can't go here, I have to go to a retirement home. And I don't know how much wisdom they're passing to the next generation, but I think it's necessary that, you know, we keep the elderly also just as healthy as the young.
Definitely. Most cultures, they live multi-generational.
Yeah.
My husband, we've been married for a year in November. He's from India, and everybody there lives with their parents until they go and get married in their
Wow.
20s and their 30s. They're always together. And even then, you even stay together sometimes, because it's just, for one, it's more beneficial. You can live more with more when you're all sharing expenses. But you have to really be getting along with your parents for that to happen. You know, if you're living in an authoritarian paradigm and raising kids in a way where you're being very mean to them and controlling them, and they have resentment for you, they probably, you know, they probably will put you in a nursing home when you're old, because you put them in school against their will and you treated them like authoritarianly. So it's like, I feel like kindness begets kindness and respect begets respect. And my dream is to live multi-generational. I've been asking my husband's parents, like, move over with us, and my parents might be moving here. They're from England.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot to offer one another through our shared experiences and, you know, the way life was for them.
Yeah, and I mean, this is just fulfilling the destiny of humankind. I see it. I mean, what we're doing, right, when I'm talking about the ending of slavery, I mean, this is a process that takes many, many years. I mean, it took several thousands of years just to end chattel slavery, and I'm saying there's other forms that exist. I mean, this is a process, but I think the goal is to set up those communities like the Amish or the Mennonites and all these other groups around the world that already are together. They're out of the system. They're not doing a lot of the things that other people are doing, and they're with their families all the time. They have a lot of these support systems. And we don't hear about them because they are in their own system. You know, they don't need our system. and they're doing successful. They're doing great. So,
Mhm.
and of course we can criticize them for this and that, but we can also admire them for many things that we come to see. So you mentioned like you would sit down with like some of your kids and you would look at like independent media, and you would look at like alternative news and stuff. I feel like that can sometimes get a little complicated too, right? Because where you're getting your sources from, even in independent media, some of it might be very fear-based. Like, oh, there's this thing happening. Oh, all this is happening. Look at this conspiracy. Look at that. There's rabbit holes. And do you feel like that can sometimes cause some problems, or are there particular sources that you like to share?
Well, it's funny because we all have such different resources we're drawn to. And because I've been part of the freedom movement now for so long, that our kids, like my husband's really into, for example, a lot of like the UFO stuff and Stephen Greer and all of that. And not all of us agree with it, but we all have the freedom to have our own beliefs. We talk about it. I recently I found somebody sent me a link. I was in some blog where somebody was claiming that I was, what's it called? Working for the government or something. And they had all these pictures because I'm a metalhead and my husband's a metal artist. So I take a lot of pictures like this. And that was that I was like satanic. And it was interesting. So I'm like, guys, look at this. Like, isn't this so interesting? Because when you read it, you could see the pieces they put together. My daughter in a scary Halloween costume. And then so we're talking about it like, wow, like this is really important to remember. Not all conspiracy theories are real. So like, who do we believe? There's extreme conspiracy theories there, and there's things I don't agree with. And there's obviously mainstream media is like next
Yeah.
level, totally ridiculous. But talking about, well, what do you guys believe? And we had this long conversation about 9/11. And we're going to be watching another documentary about it. And like, none of my kids believe it was, what they said it was, obviously. But then in our life, our family has this full spectrum of their own beliefs. So just because you're alternative, you can't force your beliefs on your kids. My kids have always had
Right.
the freedom to find what feels right to them, and we talk about it. So the sources are always growing with me, but
That's
I'm not
great.
really on technology very much, actually. I'm studying herbalism. I'm an herbalist. I love plants, gardens. So that's another thing to really remind yourself of, because
Mhm.
we can get caught up in that just as much as our kiddos, like with technology, and just to step away, you feel so much better. So yeah, there's a lot of fear-based propaganda out there.
Yeah, and I like your response to that question though, because you were sort of like, from what I understand, is like instilling critical thinking by looking at many different sources. So by saying, well, oh, this might be a little extreme, or what are your thoughts about it? It might also spark some imagination. Like, oh, wow, what if this is possible? Or what if this has happened? And I think that actually probably helped me a ton too, in my process. I don't realize it, but just from asking so many questions and getting just really, really curious, that alone just really opened my mind and helped me journal and helped me write things. Do you ever utilize journaling within this process? I mean, I'm assuming you have writing exercises too.
I mean, not for my kids. They've never had any kind of mandatory thing like that, but they've all used it in different ways. And my
Okay.
daughter, Ivy, she was taking college courses toward becoming a veterinarian. She's since changed her mind about that, but she was journaling and taking notes. She's writing a book right now, so she's always writing. Yeah, my daughter Tiffany had a journal for a while. So, I mean, it just depends on what resources your kids like. I mean, some people like handwriting, some people like to type and take notes. We have a gratitude journal that we write in almost every night. Like we just share, like, what is everyone thankful for today? And we just write down the date and what we're thankful for. And so that's really nice. So, I mean, writing isn't separate from life. Journaling isn't separate from life. It's not like doing English and writing. That doesn't exist in our reality. We just use the tools that we need and love based on, who we are. So
Yeah.
yes, writing happens all the time in various ways.
Well, you're right. I never liked writing or reading in school. And then once I got out of that and I got into subjects I actually cared about and actually were interested in, all of a sudden I was starting to write. All of a sudden I was starting to read. It just happened naturally.
Well, reading, writing, and math are all tools to help us get more of what we want in life or to expand on something. The only time they're miserable to do and kids don't like them is when they're taken out of context and they're not used as a tool and they're used as this rote practice when there's no internal motivation or no, reason why we're doing it. it doesn't make sense when it's taken out of like the context of it.
Yeah.
So
Makes
kids
it less
learn.
special too.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tool. What human being wouldn't want to learn a tool to help them get more of what they want in life or to expand on who they are? So people ask me that all the time, like, how will your kids learn to read, and how old were they when they learned to read, and did they learn this and that? And it's like it happens so naturally. And no, they never did a school workbook page. They've never been forced to practice handwriting. They've never done anything that looks remotely like school yet. They learned how they learned everything they've needed. So
Mm. So yeah, and you mentioned rote learning, which I think is important to mention because that is alliteration, sort of like repetitive learning, right? Like you do
yeah.
this and do it on repeat all the time, and we see that often within the school system, right? It's like you do this and do it often enough, and then sort of it becomes your conditioning. That goes into the whole idea of indoctrination, correct?
Yeah, and we think it's necessary
Hmm.
because it's what was done to us. It's not, it's never necessary
Yeah.
to ever force anybody or control anybody or reward anyone for writing things over and over and over again. If anything, it's making them less intelligent because what they'd be doing with their time on their own, if they weren't doing that, would be very probably beneficial to their own growth and learning. So yeah, this keeps kids busy basically.
Yeah, I
It's
think this all these concepts really tie in, even just connecting the concept of slavery versus freedom, because you mentioned, it was freedom that allowed the possibility for kids to choose essentially their own fate, their own destiny, what they want to learn. And slavery, it's like we're in this confinement of what we're told to learn, what to think instead of how to think, right? So I don't
Mhm.
know, do you share with your kids like anything about natural law and morality and the
Oh yeah.
trivium and some of you
Oh
do
yeah.
share all that too?
Oh my goodness, the other day I was in, my kids like know who Mark Passio is, for example, like because we've been speaking at conferences at the same events for, since 2012 or something. And like they know the names. To them, like the people that they know are people that are really awake because we talk about them a lot. And they don't agree with everything everybody says either. They might be more critical, one of them might be more critical about this, but my son Devin, I was actually kind of cutting and pasting and sending to him a bunch of information about Mark Passio's. He was doing a presentation on fake ass Christians. And so we had this wonderful discussion. I said, I think I remember him saying that. So I sent them to him and he was like, wow, like it's so crazy how he swears the way he does, because that would be really against most, Christian beliefs. And I said, yeah, he thinks outside the box and he's finding his own. So we talk about critical thinkers, not in a way like this is the way you have to be, son. I just
Yeah.
try to bring as many resources into their lives to learn and grow from. So we were talking about Christianity, my son and I. And so because of that, I'm like, what resources and things do I have that I could share with him about, different beliefs surrounding this? So you have to really have a passion for learning, and you kind of have to have a passion for what your kids are presenting with you, because there's no like window of readiness that you might miss if you don't introduce things at certain times. That's a total lie. And we hear that all the time about little kids and stuff. You have to introduce something before age 6. No, the window of readiness is when my kids tell me about something. And I'm like, okay, now's the time. They're in a space to hear about this and learn about it.
Hmm.
My son, with everything, like facilitating my kids learning based on what they love means to bring as many resources into their life to learn and grow from. And that might be mentorships, and it's all consensual learning. Never, ever have I said, this is really important for you to learn. You have to learn this. And if my kids, I'll offer them things, but if they say, no, I don't really want to do that, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to force them. So, but yes, they're very aware of a lot of all different alternative beliefs. And the other interesting thing is my beliefs have been growing and changing too. So I talk about that. I'm really interested in human expansion and my own evolution. So I talk about, wow, like I'm really feeling differently about XYZ. Or wow, guys, listen to this. It might sound crazy, but just listen to this like podcast with me if you want to. And
Yeah.
we need to reawaken our desire for learning and growth
I
as
feel
human.
like we can learn from them too, right? Like
Oh yeah, so much.
because they'll
Yes.
ask questions we'll not think about, or they have like a blank slate where it's like all this new stuff is coming to them, and you have a whole worldview that you've built over many years. You've sort of detached from that, but like here's a new being into this world who has a fresh mind, able to ask questions that you maybe haven't considered. I just think that's amazing. Like it's the magic of mirroring in coaching, where you talk about something or you question something, and it sort of reflects back to you.
Mhm. For sure. Yeah. So that's basically how we've always lived. And you can never really guess what your kids are meant to be and do in life. It's their journey. You can only facilitate it. And it might surprise you the direction that your kids take, because it's funny, but you can't really get attached too much to what they're doing in the moment, because they will only do something for as long as they're interested. So when Devin was really, really into blacksmithing, and he was giving survival classes on our property in New Hampshire, winter survival, summer survival. He was building his own like outdoor shelters. And in my mind, he's my first child. I'm like, wow, this is going to be amazing. He's going to be like probably have his own survival show where he'll be doing all these survival things and helping people. Started to get attached to that identity of who he was. And then he just, takes a totally different turn. And, I think that's so important that one day we were in the grocery store. My daughter Ivy was about 11. She's 17 now. And somebody said, oh, we saw you on this show. You look familiar. And we were talking to them, which would happen a lot a couple of years ago, but not since we moved to Miami. And somebody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Ivy just looked at me. And it was just kind of this funny moment, where later I said, well, adults ask kids that all the time. And Ivy said, well, what do you mean, to the lady? And she said, what do you want to be? She said, but I'm something now. I run an animal rescue and this and that and this. And the woman was like, oh, okay. So it's coming away from this preparation for the future mindset as far as childhood being preparation for adulthood. My kids have no concept of that, really. I mean, we do talk about things in the future, but whatever they are now is a profession, is who they are. It's not like you need to be preparing for this one profession someday.
Right. It's like if
So
you want to start growing food, just put a seed in the ground, get the soil, like you can prepare it now. You don't have to like read a whole curriculum first before you do it.
right, childhood isn't preparation, shouldn't be preparation for life. Childhood is life now.
Right.
So it is a big shift to take and to facilitate that. And it takes a lot of trust and letting go of fear
Yeah,
as
I
well.
I just feel like you can also relate so many of these concepts to adults. I mean, nowadays, because you say, without freedom, children make unhealthy choices. That's one of the quotes that I took from your book. I mean, it's like, without freedom, adults make unhealthy choices. I mean, we see this as reflective in so many adults. Even Mark Pastor will say they're acting like children because
Yeah.
he's saying like they need to grow up, they need to use their reasoning powers. But like even worse, I feel like they're not children either, because children would even know better. Like, don't take this from a fellow human being. Make sure to share. I feel like some simple concepts of morality even children understand, but us adults we get so wrapped in the terminology of taxation and legalese that we sometimes just mix with all this stuff.
Yeah, and it's a big responsibility to become a parent, because children learn from how you are in this world. And so if you can't punish or threaten or control a child into being moral, you can't control it. It actually makes them be the total opposite. Force and coercion and threatening and punishments and control,
Right.
that doesn't produce moral, good people following their intuition, following their inner guidance at all. It does the total opposite. It pulls them further from that, because you're giving them mixed messages constantly. This hurts me more than it hurts you, and I know better, and all these other things. It warps the human condition and makes them more and more enslaved. So that's a very important thing to remember. You need to take responsibility and be a moral person. And many of us coming to this life, we're kind of maybe more on the fringe. We've had to do a lot of internal growing and healing to be able to be kind, loving, compassionate people. Our society is not kind, loving, and compassionate generally, in the way that, statism is. It's the opposite. So
Yeah. I want to talk about that a little bit too. But before we get into that, I pulled this one quote that I really like from your book, and if you don't mind, I want to read it because it really
Sure.
summarizes a lot of what we talked about. It says, "Unschooling philosophy frees you to trust your children in their ability to learn what they need in life as they need it by giving them the freedom that all humans deserve. Learning through life is as natural as growing physically and emotionally. Reading, writing, and math are all tools our kids will pick up since we live a life surrounded by the written word and use numbers and math naturally every day. What use would learning these things even be if they weren't already part of our lives? Just like babies learn to walk and talk because these skills are useful tools to help them get what they want, so are the basics useful, desirable tools um, for our kids to get what they want in life. With this understanding, we see that like a baby will learn to walk and talk when ready without ever needing classes, the same is true for older kids with skills like reading and writing. I watch my children learn all of the necessary skills and tools they need to achieve their own personal goals in life." I really like that analogy you use with like the baby learns to walk on their own, so to speak, if you just give them some time. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder when the walking and talking classes that are going to come to be. You wait and see. People will find money in that somehow and start making parents doubt that it's possible without classes. That's how this all happened, is like the state slowly undermines parents' ability, their inner knowing and their instinct to know that children will grow and evolve.
Yeah.
They've made us so dependent that we're petrified to trust our kids in the same way. So
Yeah.
hopefully my work and that of many others is going to help free people of that fear, because we're living examples that it's possible.
Yeah, and I think of responsibility when you mentioned that, like people, the fact that they've gotten parents to abdicate their responsibility of their own children, so tells you of where we are in society.
Yeah.
Not just responsibility of their own property and what they earn and what they own, but their own children. I mean, like it's just this is insane. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, because if clearly, we live in a world where we do want to, affect change in our local level and with our kids and with ourselves first and foremost. But there's this huge world out there, which we always tend to look at the external sometimes a bit too much. But there's that world out there with a bunch of people and some few people who call themselves government who claim to rule over everybody else. Um, there's this belief called statism, which is the belief that that's legitimate. Now, I like how you like sort of introduce a lot of that to your kids just gradually by asking questions and introducing different sources, because I feel like they can understand this on their own. But how about you? Like you had to get there somehow. You had to like get out of this mindset and understand a lot of these concepts for yourself. What started you on your process to unschooling yourself, and how did you get out of that belief of statism?
The funny thing was, I never even really paid much attention to politics or government at all, to be honest, even though I was living in this country. But it just never interested me. And we had to learn about it in school, and I was glad that we didn't focus a lot on it. But parenting really is what did it. I feel like the way that I've always parented my kids, as time has gone on, the more interviews I've done, I think the first interview I ever did was like with somebody who was like libertarian anarchist, like more freedom minded. Because prior to my interviews or me stepping into that space, I was mostly with naturally minded moms, home birthing moms, and like, just the naturally minded community of mothers would want to hear what I had to say. And I'd speak at La Leche League meetings, which is like a breastfeeding support group. And I kind of got pulled into the sphere. And I think it was Stefan Molyneux was the first person. Now I know he's in a different place now, and I don't really follow him, but I had no idea that he was as big as he was. And so I was on his show, and then apparently I got so many messages. I said, wow, I guess this guy was a big deal at one point. And I had all these requests from all different talk shows. It was before all this drama and stuff within these communities, but it was Jeff Berwick and Evan Kokesh and like all of these different people. And they're like, what you're doing at home really sounds a lot like anarchy, anarchism philosophy or a more libertarian mindset. And I was like, it is. And then I learned about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, it is. So parenting this way in a partnership-based paradigm is like a mini microcosm of what the philosophy we all want for the world, in a not having a ruler. I'm not my child's ruler. I'm their facilitator. I'm not a teacher standing in front of them, forcing them to learn things against their will with good intentions. I'm a facilitator and I need to facilitate things and help them grow and navigate and have information. So, it was this realization that, oh my gosh, I understand government now. Really, parenting helped me really get what was going on in the world, is where it started me from. And once you start living in freedom in one area of your life, because most people don't know they're enslaved, they have no idea. And that's the whole beauty of it for those enslaving, is it's like this manipulation. And but once you realize and you're living without this dynamic, you can't help but let it touch other areas of your life little by little. My stuff in the beginning was about birth and freedom, and realizing that hospitals are really not the healthiest place to give birth, and they're dangerous actually, because they're pushing interventions for money. So freedom in that realm, and then freedom in food, growing food, and what's happening with organics and GMOs, and like everything gets touched when you open your mind in one area. So we just are all starting out in a different place. So when I started speaking at like anarchist events, there usually was like 2 women there, and the rest were all young men, most of which didn't have families. And I never in a million years thought I'd be sharing to that demographic. However, that introduced, their interest in government politics, and anarchism is what interested them in this type of parenting. So now it's health freedom. That was never a thing before COVID. Now it's all these health freedom pioneers finding unschooling, because they're all in a partnership-based paradigm.
Right.
So many things are in an authoritarian paradigm that once you heal from one and recognize it, everything else, it's easier to kind of get. And I don't know about you, but I'm hungry to learn more always. Like, where else is there an authoritarian paradigm that I'm not realizing?
Yeah.
And religion, another one that I'm really interested in. So
yeah. I get you. There's a screaming bird in the background.
Oh, I thought it was a child. My brain is so wired to
No,
hearing.
it's a bird, very loud bird. He screams all the time, but yeah, if you live with a green-winged macaw, you would know it's like the second largest parrot in America, so it's like very loud.
I
Your
really
ears
want
will
to.
be pierced, so probably worse than children, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like everything that you mentioned, and it's true. Like, I actually really like the fact that I'm starting to see like health professionals in this movement. I mean, like I told you, I never expected to get involved with Mark Passio or any of this stuff. I was in
Right.
the health field too, and then I got out of it. I'm like, oh shoot. This goes deeper than this. There's corruption here in the health field. I can't, give my services to certain clients because of insurance, and the doctors aren't going to accept my practice because it's nutrition, and you can't patent natural medicine and all this other stuff. It was just astonishing because I had to like naturally get there. I had no choice really but to go to freedom, especially as the other events happened in the past couple of years. It became evident I had to change my priorities and say, well, freedom is more important, because like you said, like without freedom you can't even have the choice of what you want to do with your kids. Without freedom you don't even have the choice of what you want to do with birthing, parenting, health choices, anything really. So that's paramount, and I'm glad that you were willing to look at that as a subject, and I'm glad that there's a lot of professional people and people who are carrying themselves well, and they're not wrapped in the ideologies or the politics of this. They're looking at it purely from a human, like, fundamental sense. Like, we just want to be free. We're naturally free. That's it. Like, no labels, no strings attached, no identities.
Yeah, exactly. And one important thing I just want to add is human beings and new parents are conditioned to distrust themselves. And this is why the work, for me, my work with birth is the most important, to be honest, because when you go into a hospital to give birth and it's medically managed, there's so many things acting against the woman to have her doubt herself, which leads to needing to be rescued or saved from complications. And when you think your own body didn't work properly, it is a spiral downward of like distrusting yourself and like turning to experts. The doctor creates the problems that they then save you from, and you're thanking them for saving your baby's life, and they're telling you your body didn't work properly. And that is the very, very beginning where the deepest parenting patterns are set for both the child and the mother. And so when you start from that place, you turn to experts for everything. I say experts as in quotes, but you turn to authorities for everything. Well, how much should I feed my baby? I'm not making enough milk. And oh gosh, I couldn't even imagine educating them. I better send them to school. Keeping a woman like controlled and never triggering that, intuitive wisdom allows statism to function as it does. It all starts there. You know, when we
Yeah.
can just encourage a woman from the beginning to trust herself and to do so safely, and finding the people that believe in her and that will help her create something. A fiercely protective mother's born. And
Mhm.
that intuition is sometimes for the very first time, Corey, is ignited and listened to,
Yeah.
because we've suppressed it so much that when we can rekindle those flames, people slip into trusting themselves for everything with their kids. They're not subbing it out to all these different people because they don't think they can do it.
Mm.
So I think statism begins at birth.
Yeah. You're
I
right.
think it's intended that way.
Yeah, we even see, I don't know if you know about the birth certificates that are announced at birth too. That has a lot to do with the current world and how they get us into the system with the corporations and making straw man names of you so they can put taxes upon you and have you registered in their system and a bunch of other things just from signing a document. And making sure you do that. I've literally met parents where their child was taken away from them at the hospital because they refused to sign the birth certificate. I mean, this is a reoccurring theme, and that just shows you it's like, are we enslaved? Well, how much evidence do you need? If you disobey, you're going to be violently imposed upon, thrown in the cage, and not allowed to, do certain things. Your money, what you earn, is being taxed upon, stolen from you. I mean, how much evidence do people need to start to realize that there is that sort of dynamic? I mean, it's incredible, but one of the things that came to mind when you were talking about like imposing, and this is like one of my final questions, that I would want to ask you about, and you can be completely honest with me, whatever you want to say. When it comes to like imposing diet, when it comes to health, because I'm a health coach, I don't like to impose diet. Like you, I like to listen to the individual and find out what is it that they need. I trust their body and their wisdom, and depending on their environments and what's going on. So when it comes to your children, there's a lot of people who are saying like veganism is the most moral way, and this is the most everybody has to do this and that. Would you are you do you prescribe to that vegan mindset, or do you think it's important that parents really look at their options, like raw animal products, like raw milk, in case they can't produce breast milk, for example, and looking at these products that are banned from the government because they know it's really helping a lot of people?
Well, 99.9% of women can produce breast milk, but that's a different conversation.
Wow.
But yeah, so I've been vegan for 10 years and my kids have always had the freedom to choose. Two of them are vegan, Devin's not, and Tiffany's not. I've always supported it. I was vegan and cooking my son's steaks. So it's their journey, and no agenda, not even a vegan agenda, no agenda comes before my children and their
Wow.
needs and their choices ever. Which is kind of funny because I get a lot of crap from the vegan community. Like, how can you let your kids eat meat? I'm like, because I trust their bodies. I
Mhm.
trust what they're drawn to. I don't think veganism, like I know I don't know everything. In fact, the older I get, the more I realize I have a lot to learn. Right now, for me, this works, but I trust Devin, as much more than probably I trust myself, even because of my own damage from my past. But he enjoys it. He feels it makes him strong. His siblings, like Ivy's kind of an animal activist, so she'll tease him about it. Like, how's your flesh, Devin? But it's always been just this fun part of, not fun, but sometimes funny, but a part of my life where I facilitated it always, whatever they want, whatever they're drawn to.
Mhm.
Now, I want to respect all my kids. Ivy didn't like any animal products on one, we took one shelf of the fridge that was for animal products and we kept them there. Like, we wanted to respect everybody's needs and wishes, and it can be done. And so I've gone to vegan protests with Ivy because she wants to be there, and then gone home with my son Devin and collected eggs up at Nana's and brought them down and made him scrambled eggs. I don't eat it, but I'm so happy to facilitate whatever he needs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of confusing for some people because they always think they're going to catch me. Well, what about if your sons want to, your kids want to eat animal products? It's like, well, I would buy it for them then and support them.
Yeah.
We have separate pans in our house for animal products to respect those that don't want to use the same pans. Sometimes it's a little bit of a pain, but you learn how to navigate it all to meet the needs of everybody.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. I mean, like people want to fit you into a box, and you're like, nope, can't do that.
Exactly. They try to all the time, and they're like, well, how do you, my kids, we've always watched documentaries together too and researched things. We watched Cowspiracy, the first time many years ago, and Devin became vegan for a while. I didn't have him watch it with that intention either. I have no attachment at all, and I'm not more happy when my kids are vegan. I'm not. All I want them to do is be true to themselves. And that's a really hard concept for people to grasp when they get super passionate about their own agenda, that they want and they think it's best. I don't think that what I'm doing is necessarily best. It's what I know, and I'm doing the best I can right now. But I'm willing to grow and learn and be open to it always.
Yeah.
So
And that's good wisdom to pass on too, to your children. It's like, say, hey, have an open mind to other people, and you're basically saying to them, don't impose your opinion on others, so to speak too.
yeah.
At the same time, you could share your ideas, you can educate them, you can ask questions, but you wouldn't violently impose it like we do in the case of government, for example.
No,
But
no. And I try to stay away from real dogmatic approaches to things, because we could easily fear others into doing what we're doing. I could fear people into having a home birth by talking about the dangers of hospital birth in such a way, but I've really come in more to a place of I don't want to use the tools that government and authoritarian
right.
status use to get people to do things. That's lazy. It's not very intelligent. Instead, trust people. If they want information from you about why you are the way you are, or why you have the choices, you've made the choice you make, give them information and support them. And that's where I'm at with everything in my life.
I really like the way that you carry yourself and deliver this message. I just want to put that out there because it's very open-minded, very open-hearted, and you're considering many different factors here. You're not just willing to say, do this and that's it, that's the solution. So I appreciate that. But would you say there's any action necessary? This is my last question, official last question. Like for independent media, people who are producing content out there, they're like, you need to see the truth and look at what's going on. Do you think there's certain things that they need to do that they aren't doing that you would like to be seeing done personally in the independent media that would help create more of a change in the world and help steer things more toward this direction of freedom?
And I think it takes all kinds of messengers, all kinds of different ways to convey information, because there's so many different places that people are at to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
A more authoritarian approach for some people works because that's what they're comfortable with. You can fear. There's a lot of documentaries that are really fear-based, and you can convince somebody in a second to have your view by showing them. And some people, they just understand that more. I think people need to heal from their childhoods, and not only that, but from being from statism in general. It's a very abusive, damaging, life-altering experience to recognize, be aware, and then look at ourselves and say, in what ways am I still controlling others or wanting to? In what ways am I still in fear? So as far as media goes, I just think keep offering. The only place to ever come from is your authentic self. When you're speaking and presenting content in media from your authentic place, the perfect people will be drawn to it. Because if you're trying to fit in and saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't use fear because I'll get more people, or maybe I shouldn't cover this and I shouldn't approach it like this, you're losing sight of who you are. Your message has to come from here in whatever way it creatively comes out. There will always be someone to judge and criticize and give you helpful tips on how to make it better. The truth is you are an individual person bringing a message that only you can bring, and do it in whatever way, and then be willing to evolve. I'm sure every person that's producing content in the freedom movement has evolved from their first video, from their first, place. And that is the journey. We all have so much more healing and growth to do. So that would be my answer.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I always like to get people's views on that. And I think, we can generally agree, we want a better world out there, and there are solutions that people can utilize right now. They don't have to wait. And I encourage people to check out your book, Radical Unschooling: A Revolution Has Begun, because it really goes into all these concepts in detail too. So everybody check out that resource that she's providing here for the summit for everybody. And thank you for doing that, by the way. I'm also offering my book for free as well, Slavery Gone for Good. So thank you so much as a fellow author.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you just for being here and sharing everything. I appreciate it so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank you. So that's Dayna Martin, everybody. Check out her links and all her great content and her website, daynamartin.com. And like I said, if you want to see a lot more resources like the ones that we're offering and a lot more speakers that are talking about a lot of important topics like this, go to nita.one/summit, nita.one/summit. Thank you very much for watching. This is the End of Slavery Summit. Take care.